Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Stronger Live Show. My name is Tatiana Kolovu. Today, I am sharing with you and with my friend Dave Yewman that I'll introduce in a little bit how to present like a rock star. This past month in the LinkedIn Live or the LinkedIn newsletter, Stronger, I talked a lot about how you build your credibility in a presentation, because quite often this may be the only chance you get to get attention, for someone to say, what was her name again? Or to get an approval, or to get a promotion, or to even get a job. It's all banking on that one presentation. And I talked about in the newsletter how you can boost your credibility, and starting with things such as knowing who your audience is. And if you're trying to be persuasive, being sure to use solid logical reasoning with the information that you share. And being sure that, that you brag a little bit. You talk about your credibility or your background, or you talk a lot about your accomplishments, but you do it in a way that complements or relates to what it is that you're sharing. So as we get started here, I'm looking in comments and seeing where you're all coming in from. I love to know locations. I'm in Bloomington, Indiana. You know, I live and work in Bloomington. I work for the Kelley School of Business at Indiana University. Love to see any alums coming in. As I also talked about in the newsletter, being able to pivot. This is a live show, and we've been behind the scenes preparing for this, making sure that we have all the boxes checked. But quite often some things always don't go the right way, and we have to build our credibility as we pivot. Welcome, Portland, Oregon, and Trinidad. I don't think we've had anyone from Trinidad before. The south of France, and Jay, hi from Poland. So good to see you. I often make a little map and I show all the great, different, and diverse places everyone's coming in from. The final thing I talked about in the Stronger newsletter was how important some of the details are, the optics, anywhere from what you wear in a presentation or how your visuals look. And I told the story of the very famous coach, Coach Bob Knight, who I took a course from, and he talked about how to prepare for interviews. Virginia Beach, welcome, and welcome Norma from Toronto, Canada. Today, as you share, or as you think of what it is that my colleague Dave and I will share, think of a message that you have to send. It may be a presentation, it may be a short pitch, it may be an introduction of yourself as a speaker or as a potential employee or an intern. And greetings to South Africa. And think of what is it going to take to be a rock star? Or maybe I should ask you to engage you all a little bit. What does it take to be a rock star in a presentation? How do you show up that strong, persuasive, and influential? So Eugene, Nenos, welcome. So as you're thinking about this, what does it take to be a rock star in your pitch and your presentation? It's my distinct honor to welcome my friend Dave Yewman. Now, Dave hails from Portland, Oregon, and the state of Arizona, but lately, or right now, he is residing in the southern Mediterranean and is soon enough going to Paphos, Cyprus. So Dave and I have worked together for several years now, and we literally met online. Someone knew both of us and said, the two of you need to meet because you do similar things. If we want to bring Dave on, Shelby, it'd be great to see his smiling face. He's drinking coffee. It's evening where he is right now. Welcome, Dave Yewman. There's a lot of things that Dave does, and as I introduce him, I should show a weekend language book that we're going to give you an option to connect to at the end of our session. But the best way for me to describe what Dave does, and now what Dave and I both do as we collaborate, is to show you a slide that has logos from some of the big companies that he works with. So visuals always quickly get more of a response. All I am grateful for is the Indiana University logo. Dave and I, for the last 3 years, have designed a seminar that helps PhD and postdoc students have an easier time talking about the brilliant work that they do in their research. So Dave, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's good to be here. I thought about having a glass of wine, but then I thought twice and thought maybe that's not a good idea. So I went with a third coffee. But no, it's great to be here, and it's great to dive right in.
Absolutely. And we've got people from Egypt, from South Africa. There's someone from Corfu. Elena, welcome. Dave messaged me before the show and said, is it appropriate to drink coffee? And I said, your wife Heidi is going to have you running around the apartment later today. You go drink your coffee, Dave. But you will be alert and prepared. Dave, we have so much to share and we've prepared a lot. But if you would say, what are all the things that happen and that are important and that matter? Could we show it in a video clip?
I think we could.
Right. Let's roll it.
Ricky Bobby, a force to be reckoned with, possibly.
I'm not sure what to do with my hands.
Yeah, this feels more natural. Is that right?
A president of the United States, again, has to...
Unquestionably, the mind should shut down.
You can't think of any reason why they should not take you seriously.
My name is Bill Davison. I have been a Republican in times good, and I have been a Republican in times bad.
Terrorists who are going to come to Western Europe and come here and kill us.
Why are you talking like that?
These brownies are,
I got 7 words for you. I love Ghoulie Bibs integrated multi-platform functionality. Yeah!
This Trump team will work with all of the local markets to harness the power of our local journalism, feed it into a funnel, and then optimize it so that we reach the biggest global audience possible.
What the did she just say?
What's the headline here?
Stock market's rigged.
My master made me this collar so that I may talk, squirrel.
To be a rock star, when we make a pitch, a presentation, an ask, right?
Right. It's so funny. The thing about Ricky Bobby there with not knowing what to do with his hands, you wouldn't believe how many times that comes up in high-level coaching sessions with senior executives. A lot of those companies that you saw with the logo slide, it's unbelievable, but it's important. It's really important that people get this right and they do things that they are distracting and they don't realize it, like they're twisting their wedding ring or touching their nose, adjusting their glasses. In fact, we've come up with specific practical tips for all of you to help you present like a rock star.
Right. And today we couldn't talk about all of these together. And right before we started, we said, let's leave the Q&A for another show. We can't possibly cover them all. But we're going to talk about how you structure your message first, how you prepare for your Rockstar presentation, how you put visuals that really accentuate your message, but don't distract for your message. And finally, how can you interact with the audience? Dave, before we get started, I wanted to show a couple of things. We've got people here, of course, people like the video. You have to give us a big check to get that. I'm looking to see what all the comments we've got people from Vietnam and Virginia, Algeria and Colorado, and we talked about the south of France, and we've got some Brits here. We've got some Londoners being your friends and supporting you. Can we replay this? We'll replay it at the end. How about if we'll promise to do that? So let's dive right in. It really is important to get to the point first. You want to present like a rock star. You have to hit and start with your message. Right, Dave?
Right. There's probably 2 things that people don't do that they really should do when they present. Number 1 is get to the point. And I mean, get to the point in the first 12 seconds. And number 2 is they don't tell a story. And for everybody on here, beginning tomorrow, that's what we want you to do. To present like a rock star, get to the point and tell a story. What do I mean by that? Well, get to the point can be as simple as you hear someone speak and they say something like, look, if you remember nothing else today, remember this. And what they're doing is they're signaling like, this is the important bit, write it down. Yeah. You don't hear that enough, frankly. You think of it like a newspaper headline. Let's say you're a big fan of football, but you had to miss the World Cup final because you had to be on a plane. Well, that's a disaster in any way, shape, or form. So the plane lands, and then you pop open your phone, and you say, "Oh, I want to see the score of the game. Who won? Did Argentina win? Did France win?" And the headline is Argentina plays France. And you're like, what the heck is happening? That's a stupid headline. It's infuriating. And the fact that Argentina won 4-2 on penalties is in paragraph 5. You wouldn't read that story, but that's exactly what we do when it comes to presentations. We save the best for paragraph 9. No, right up front, Argentina wins the World Cup. That's your big headline, just like you would in a newspaper. And that is a real key when it comes to presentations, right, Jan?
I should tell you all, Dave is a recovering journalist, so you can see how a lot of this comes in. Dave, it's time for our teams in the class that I teach at the Kelley School of Business to be doing a lot of team presentations. And quite often I have students that say, "Thank you so much for having us. Welcome. Good morning." And I just sit in the back going, cut that out. Valuable time to take a step forward and open with your situation or something that's attention getting, and don't waste very valuable moments of time. What are some of the others? One of our learners said here, I remember in one presentation, I put my hand in my armpits, right? There's an SNL skit where people used to do that. I'm not going to leave your name up there for too long, so we don't harm your credibility. But it's so true. We get so nervous. And I tell my students, practice that beginning again and again and again, because you will get nervous in the introduction. And if you're going to memorize anything, it should be that opening sentence. Anything else, Dave? Any other tips? How else can we grab attention and structure our message in a way that we are rock stars with our messages?
Yeah. Giving a headline in the first 10 or 12 seconds is one way to do it. The other way to do it is to just tell a story. And, there's numerous ways to do that. But one way I really like is using a specific word. And I want everybody on here to try this beginning tomorrow. Try using this, imagine. Imagine is a powerful word. Imagine if we could double our sales in Southeast Asia in Q2. Imagine if we could drop an extra $1 million to the bottom line. Imagine if you could do X. That's exactly what my product enables. That one word forces the audience to, imagine. And let me give you an example. There was a guy that I love. It's Dr. David Williams. He is a public health researcher at Harvard. And his specific area is discrepancies in public health when it comes to race. And he goes on 60 Minutes, the news magazine show here in the States, and I'm sure it's shown around the world. And in 33 seconds, he uses a specific imagined scenario and an analogy to grab control of the interview. Now, being on 60 Minutes is pretty high profile and very nerve-wracking, but clearly he had practiced. He knew that he was going to use this scenario. And we're going to play it for you now. Listen for the imagine, listen for the analogy, and then he gets into the details because he set the context, because he started with imagine. Let's take a look.
Sure.
Imagine a fully loaded jumbo jet with 220 passengers and crew taking off and crashing today. And the same thing happened every day next week, and every day next month, and every day for the rest of the year. That's exactly what is occurring when we say there are racial disparities in health in the United States. Over 200 Black people dying prematurely every single day.
What an analogy. Incredible. And I'd like to say that I'm sure that's not just off the top of his head. He's practiced this. He's tested it. He's heard himself do it. He's watched himself do it. And he comes across like a rock star with this specific example.
Yeah,
one other
absolutely.
Imagine like that I've heard and I use, or we use quite often, is when you give an answer to a question, such as, tell me about your research, or tell me a little bit about you. And you make a statement and say one thing. You can do a, for example, I forgot to use this in the introduction, Dave. I remember you said your son, Aaron, when it was show and tell, invite your parents to school, your son described you, your job was to teach people not to say, But if I said to you, Dave, what do you do in your profession? You would say, I coach people on how to speak better, for example, correct?
Yeah. Right. The teaching people how not to say works for a group of 11-year-olds. You might need something else for a professional interview. But
That's
it's
right.
true. All of these things are available to us. It's just that we forget. We don't practice and we get nervous, so we don't get to the point, and the presentation goes off the rails in the first 60 seconds, and we wonder why. Well, it's because we didn't practice and we didn't use an imagined scenario and we weren't ready to go. I coached a guy the other day who swayed like this the whole time he was speaking. And after about 2 or 3 minutes of watching that, he was ready to just, tear all his hair out because he had no conscious memory of doing it because he hadn't practiced his opening and the nerves took over. And I'm sure it's the same for all of you. Someone, Jay, in the comments said, it's like a scientific abstract. You do a summary first. That's exactly right. Think of the opening as the summary of the article to get them to read the rest of it. It's got to grab them metaphorically by the throat.
Absolutely. And even when you do a story and an imagine, try not to make it clickbait. It can't be luring to get their attention, but it is unrelated to the topic of what you'll say. Make sure you field test it and you practice it before you do it, just like the example that you showed in 60 minutes. So number one, if you want to be a rock star in your next pitch in your presentation, you absolutely have to structure with a headline first, and then you have to practice a lot of what it is that you're doing. So I'm curious to all of you, you can keep telling us in what is the next pitch? What's the next presentation you're preparing for? And we're going to tell you how important it is to practice. That's what we do, Dave, right?
That's what we do. Frankly, it's all we do. And, when you think about it, somebody who is excellent at anything. Serena Williams is a fantastic tennis player, but it isn't like she's just sitting around on the couch, drinking coffee and eating donuts and relaxing when she's not playing. She's practicing. We just don't see it. And there is a misperception about speaking is that, some people are just good. She's just a good speaker, or he's just a good speaker. It's complete nonsense. This is a learned skill, like hitting a tennis ball or shooting a basketball or singing or dancing or playing the guitar. There's hours and hours and hours of practice. And let me give you a specific way to practice, because we're trying to give you practical tips for being a rock star. It's right. This thing. It's your phone. All of you have this within 2 feet of you right now. This is the best messaging tool there is. So imagine that you have a presentation coming up and you think you've got the opening. You hold up your phone, you do the opening for 2 minutes, and then you watch it. No, I know you don't want to do it, but do it anyway. When you do that, you'll see if you're getting to the point. You'll see if you're telling a story. You'll see if you're swaying back and forth or doing anything distracting. Videotape is truth serum. It is irrefutable proof. And when you practice on camera at all times, and it will make you better. Will you hate it? Yes, you will hate it, but it will make you better, right?
Right. Shelby says, I have a sales pitch or a sales call to prepare for next week, and I don't want to do it because I feel so awkward. Nobody likes to do this. And we show up, or I tell my students, and they have to practice. I sometimes will say, if you feel that awkward, Shelby, listen to the audio first and then add the layer of the video, because if it's very awkward, or if it's very nerve-wracking, putting the two together may be more difficult. But as Dave said, the tools that we have to use are there. And now we also, Dave and I are huge super fans of Udily.ai. Shelby, if you want to put it up, it's an AI tool that you can use to practice on video, but also get so much feedback on the types of fillers that you're using, the tone of voice, the energy you use. Dave, you recorded yourself. Tell us a little bit about this.
Yeah, it was a really interesting thought experiment. So I recorded the opening 3 minutes of a session I was doing, and I uploaded it to Udily. So if you look at this, and you can all use this because it's completely free. What you do is you sign up for an account, you upload video, and then as you can see below the video of me is a transcript. Now, it's a rough transcript. It's not perfect because it's done by a computer, but it shows you exactly what you said, which is really valuable. And if you look on the right side, there are a couple of different tabs. One of them counts the number of non-words, so, you like, but. all of these words that are very distracting. It'll give you a count of how many you used. The other thing I really like about it is it will flag any gendered language. If you show up to a webinar and go, hey guys, well, obviously not everybody on there is a guy. So it'll flag it for you and it'll capture it. It counts your speed. If you're talking too fast, that's a huge trigger for using non-words. This is just one way of using video, but I think it's a really interesting way to prepare for a speech, because people don't see all the practice runs. All they see is the final speech, and we want them to look at you and go, wow, that's a rock star speaker right there.
Yeah, he did it the right way, right? Manish, one of our learners, just posted a question. A few more shout outs on Udemy. One of the things that it now can do, you can go in and practice the tell me a little bit about you, or with our PhD students, tell me about your research. And then the AI tool generates 3 to 4 impromptu questions that you respond to, and you record yourself as well. So you can go back and show it to your PhD advisor, or show it to your spouse, or show it to a friend and say, how does this sound? How does this look? Manish is saying, what if you sound low while you're presenting? How to sound like someone loves to listen. I like that. We want to be like someone that loves to listen. Dave, what are your thoughts on this question?
I see that all the time. There's a couple of different reasons for it. Number one is quite often the language is pretty flat. It's a great question, Manish. What I see people saying things like this. What is your product? It is a leverage, best of breed, integrated, symbiotic, cloud-based AI app. Boring, don't care, doesn't get to the point, doesn't tell me anything. The reason we called the book Weekend Language is that you want to put a layer of conversational language on top of it, like everybody does on the weekends. Everybody on this session is a great storyteller 2 days out of the week on the weekends. And on the weekends, when somebody says, what does your product do? You say, oh, it helps you clip coupons in the grocery store so you save a ton of money. That's what we need. And that's how you get that nice colloquial lilt, and it sounds conversational, just like you're talking to a friend over a cup of coffee, rather than the monotonous, jargon-laden weekday language.
So Manish jumps in and says how to connect with the audience. Manish, one thing is what you say, and you don't want to make it sound mechanical. If your tone is low, you can practice by putting that phone in the back of the room so that you project more. You can listen to your voice. You can ask rhetorical questions. I wondered myself, and you can change the intonation of your voice, and you really have to practice more doing that. I'd want to hear if your voice is monotonous or it is what it is that you're saying. Usually gives you some feedback on energy as well. Dave, before we close on this topic and talk about how important practice is, we had one of our other learners who said, in a virtual presentation, this happens so often, you just get interrupted at hello. The senior leaders raise a hand, or at best, Matthew, I'm sure they don't even raise a hand. They open their mic or they come in and they interrupt. And in a way, I have a whole LinkedIn learning course on this. You remember, showing your credibility by pivoting, you really have to allow the person to interrupt you and say, respond to their comment, respond to their question calmly, but be able to process some of that thought. Dave, do you have some thoughts on these kinds of interruptions?
Yeah, it's tough to manage. It really is, especially when the person doing the interrupting is the senior person in the room. But a couple of things. Number one, I would say, if there's a question that interrupts and you say, that's an excellent point, we're going to get to that in the next 5 minutes, I promise. And then you're back into your flow, if that's acceptable. Or perhaps you say, that's an excellent point. Let's jump right to that. And you go to that in the narrative and then jump back and say things like, well, let me get back to where I was, because I want to make sure you all have the context for why I'm suggesting this particular strategy. So
I'm sure you want to learn something else. I know you can demonstrate the answer to Sophia's problems. I usually get too excited. I get out of breath. Dave talks, he gets too excited, and he does let me see.
Yes, my standard trick, Sophia, and it's the oldest thing in the book. Let's combine the questions. You ask me a question that I don't know the answer to, and I've lost my place and I'm a little flummoxed. And I say, Sophia, that's an interesting point. And of course, the answer is, and hopefully inspiration has struck while I was taking a slug of water, or perhaps I throw my co-presenter under the bus. That's a really good point. And I think Tatiana's a little bit more poised to answer
exactly.
that.
That's already happened 3 times so far, Sophia, so you know. So really think about it. Some of you are saying, does the Udemy tool give you live commentary and feedback? If it gives you the feedback live, you're going to be distracted while you're speaking. You want to just do your thing, record it, and then study some of the feedback. That's an important part. By the way, it also, we told you we're super fans, it comes in and just records your voice in a meeting, because the prepared stuff is one thing, but when you're speaking impromptu in a meeting and your voice is low, or you talk with a question mark at the end of the time, or you do some other verbal tick that's frustrating, that it's going to help you practice. As Dave said, practice is the only way to be a rock star. And you mentioned actors and singers. You have the best clips to demonstrate that. Tell us about the next show and tell, Dave.
Yeah. So what we're about to show you is somebody very prominent practicing, intensely and messing up. You may have seen the musical Hamilton, or you may have been lucky enough to go and see it live, but you may have seen it on Disney Plus during COVID. Lin-Manuel Miranda plays Alexander Hamilton, and in the musical, he has 916 lines. Can you imagine having to memorize 916 lines?
Insane.
And we're going to play you 2 videos. They're each about 20 seconds. One is from his Instagram feed where he's practicing. And you'll see he's sitting in his kitchen, he has headphones on, and he's practicing Rise Up, one of the songs from Hamilton, and he messes it up. And then immediately after that, we're going to show you what it looked like in the finished production of Hamilton. None of this stuff is accidental. This is a learned skill, whether you're Serena Williams playing tennis, or somebody getting ready for a presentation, or Lin-Manuel Miranda practicing. So let's watch the videos. Go ahead and roll the tape.
As a kid in the Caribbean, I wished for a war. I knew that I was poor. I knew it was the only way to rise up. If they tell my story, I am either gonna die on the battlefield in glory or rise up and fight for a command. There's only one. Fuck me. Fight for this land. As a kid in the Caribbean, I wished for a war. I knew that I was poor. I knew it was the only way to rise up. If they tell my story, I am either gonna die on the battlefield in glory or rise up. We will fight for this land. There's only one man who can give us a command so we can rise up. Understand it's the only way to rise up. Rise up.
Unbelievable. I took my goddaughter to the show in Chicago. At the end of it, all I could think about is, how do they do what they do? That was the question that I had. How do they know? Because they're singing and moving and acting, and it's unbelievable. The questions keep rolling in. I don't know if we're going to get to all of them, friends, but if we don't, we'll be sure to answer them on the feed. Structure your message. Someone says, I only have a couple minutes to cover company values. It's okay, as Dave said, start with your words. What are they? Integrity, compassion, empathy. We believe that. And how you say it, the conviction in which you start. I wouldn't start by saying, I would like to share with you our company values. Wasted air and wasted opportunity to catch attention. Think of your headlines and practice them.
Yeah. And let me give you one specific phrase that sometimes helps with abstract things like values and strategies. You say, our company's value is X. What that means is, and what that means is a translator phrase, because it'll say, we talk about at Nike, we talk about just do it. What that means on a day-to-day basis is this. And then you translate it and summarize it in very conversational terms. That's what people remember. They may remember the mission statement, but they will definitely remember the story, and the story supports it, and it all knits together. And you can remember that and deliver that in an enthusiastic way, to Tatiana's point.
And as you said, when they leave, they want to remember it's also the recency effect. If you can bring some of that flavor of what you opened with at the close It's as if you put a nice bow on your presentation and your pitch and you hand it to the audience so they remember the theme, they remember how they felt when you spoke, they remember the vivid analogies and the stories, and less is more. You have to plan to cut back some of the blah, blah, blah. Jennifer, yes, this is being recorded, so you can go back and watch for sure. So prepare your structure, get to the point, hit the headlines, and practice, 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 just like Lin-Manuel did for Hamilton. We then, quite many of you are asking questions about virtual settings, where you've all seen the little face on the top right of the person that would rather not be seen, and the big screen is taken up by the PowerPoint, which quite often is too overstacked with words. Dave, what are your thoughts?
It makes me crazy. It makes me crazy that Zoom and Teams and Meet and all these software packages make it so that there's 95% slide and 1% Dave in the corner. You know, it's difficult enough presenting remotely without having to be stuck in the tiny corner. And then the other, to your second point, people try and do too much on the slides. Mm-hmm. Think of slides, presentation slides now. Handout slides are different. Presentation slides are billboards. When you're driving in your car and you look at a billboard for 2 or 3 seconds and then you look back at the road, in that 2 or 3 seconds, you ingest basic information and then you're back on the driving. You don't want to look at the billboard for too long. You don't want to crash the car. Same thing for slides, for presentations. Now, Tatiana likes to talk about doing 2 decks, which sounds like more work, but it actually is much more effective. Talk about that a little bit, Tatiana.
Or sometimes a handout, or sometimes an executive summary, your whole idea in a summary, but you are the main event. You cannot have the visuals interact while they're moving, or take over for the message that you're sharing. You are the main event. So really keep thinking about that, because I teach students who have access now to so many different types of deck designs and Canva and Google Slides and all these other tools that really, honestly, they need to look slick and they need to look good, but they are distracting. In a virtual setting like where we are now, Dave, again, another plug for another tool that we like. I love this tool that you're going to talk about in a little bit, that keeps you in the limelight and makes the visuals sort of your assistant coach. Do you want to show us?
Yeah, absolutely. It's called So what happens is this software package, which is actually spelled that way, it's kind of a weird name. You can find it, again, it's free. And what happens here is that you're basically a TV presenter with a window. You got a picture in picture. You can bring it up, you can take it down. So if I had something to tell you, I can pop it up in a slide, I can make my point, and then I can make it disappear again. This puts me in control of the slides rather than the slides being 90% of the screen. Now I can make this full screen.
Exactly. If there's a lot that you want them to look at, you can do it full screen, or you can kind of hold it on to the side. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So this, again, I'm the presenter. Someone said that in the comments. We're the presentation, not the slides. The slides are just a visual aid. Let me give you an illustration of good and bad slides using Now I'm still here, I'm behind the screen, but let me show you a real slide that is just a living embodiment of death by PowerPoint. Now you can see, this is a slide, I found it online. If you put up this kind of slide, then your audience is immediately distracted, because audience can read about 3 to 4 times faster than they can hear. So you're still talking about the mission up top, and somebody's on strategies and tactics, and they're wondering why there's a typo in the second bullet point. Too much information. Same thing here. Heaven help us, this is just the conclusion. So what's he doing? He's reading it. And look at his co-presenter. Guy's not even looking. So the mantra is this: a billboard, one thing on one slide. Apple does this very, very well. There's a lot of technology in an Apple Watch. It's a simple picture, and then you have to look at Tim Cook giving the speech. It's called the 3-second rule. It takes me 3 seconds or less to think about what's on the slide, and then my attention is back on the speaker. This is one of my clients actually used this. He put up this slide and he said, I'm going to talk about 3 things today: time, technology, and eyes. And if you think about it, I could make that slide this big, and it would still work. It would still work because it's so small in terms of text. And here, I'll go to another slide. This is a slide that says 72% of the part-time workers in Japan are women. Now, that's a simple slide, but that slide's better. Because with this slide, why am I here?
Yeah.
You can all read.
You can say that.
With this slide, you need me to say 72% of the part-time workers in Japan are women. What that means for our Q4 strategy is X.
Right. And Dave, can I interrupt you for a minute and say, if put that slide up again, I would coach you to say, repeat that. If that's an important number, and you can say 72%. Let me say that again. 72% of part-time. What does this mean for us? So be thinking about emphasizing. I always tell my students, think of Austin Powers and $1 million. Emphasize the numbers. Don't just quickly say them. And as you said, Dave, if you're going to say it, you don't really need to write it. A lot of our speakers think, but if I print out the slides and give it to them, they're not going to know what I said. Well, then share the notes or create a different deck that you share. So true.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's see. Pictures provide, our LinkedIn user is saying, pictures provide cues on what to say. If you intentionally use various elements of the photo to provide your clues, but you still need to rehearse and practice. You know, quite often the flow of the deck becomes your note card. If you know what goes with each of the graphic or one word to cue you, I quite often will cut and paste maybe an article so I remember to reference a citation. So you can do a lot with the visuals, but our bottom line is don't distract from you being the rock star of the message of what you share.
Let me add one other thing on presenting like a rock star. Rockstar presenters do not do the slides first.
Yeah.
Now, what I would encourage you to do, all of you, you pick up your phone, you record your opening 2 minutes, you do that a couple of times, you think about it, you use Udly, and then, and only then, when you've got the opening couple of minutes baked, do you say, okay, what visuals would go with this? Because what tends to happen is I get a presentation and I don't practice and I think, oh, I'll just grab some of Tatiana's slides and some of Shelby's and some of John's and some of Eric's and I'll put that all together and that's my presentation. Well, it's not. It's just an amorphous blob of content with no narrative. So do the talk track first and then do the slides.
And then, you know, test making the food and then go back and tweak the recipe and write it out. You never just take pen and paper and say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. You always test it out in making the food. If you start with something and then you outline it and then you do the slides should be coming last. I'm going to make my students listen to this as they do their presentation. So we talked about, I go again, how important it is to start with the headlines, to practice what you do, to make sure your visuals are your assistant coach. If there's one final message today we want to share is, remember, you're not creating a monologue. You are there to engage the audience. And many of you, I know from the types of presentations you do, are maybe leading discussions. That is your pitch. Or maybe you're doing a training. We've got a lot of people from these lives that attend us and are from learning and development, and you're connecting with them as well. I have to say, I can say, wait a minute, do you share your, wait, one more question before we get to interaction. What are your thoughts on this, Dave? Do you share your presentation ahead of time?
Yeah, it's a really tough one because I know a lot of companies insist on that. If you're presenting to the executive team, they want your slides ahead of time, and that's a very difficult situation to put yourself in. But I would say if you can withhold the slides, because it gives the audience an added incentive to listen to you. And you can say in the course of the presentation, look, all of the slides that you're going to see today, I'm going to email to you at the close of the meeting. But let me make, you know, the key points first. And if you have to give the slides ahead of time, what I would say is this. You know, you all have the slides, but let me just take 6 minutes and do a quick summary, including a couple of customer things that aren't in the slides, and then we'll get into the slide deck. Fair enough? So what you've done, it's called a signpost. You've basically told them, everyone shut up, listen to me for 6 minutes, and that had better be an exquisite 6 minutes, by the way, and then we'll get into the slides. It's a difficult situation. It's a great question, but I would withhold them if you can.
Yeah. Or in some companies, they want an executive summary, a one-pager, the P&G, one-pager, which in a way maybe is not even a slide. It's a document that says, here's the problem, here's the question we need to answer, here's some of the research that we've done, and I want to discuss this, that you can, in a way, feed it, and then how you present it. In some cases, I don't know, Dave, you work with higher level executives that have more of a say in how they present some of this. But if they do tweak that, that may be a good way to engage the audience.
It's legal in all 50 states and around the world to do a presentation without slides.
Yeah.
It can be done. I've seen it done.
Yes.
And frankly, if you go to the TED.com website, frankly, I think 5 out of the top 10 TED Talks don't have any visuals. It's just someone speaking. So I think we tend to reflexively think slides, and we should consider slides only when appropriate, only when it really helps to have a visual.
Yeah. And one of our learners, Tiger, says, I never give up my slides. I create a takeaway fact sheet. That's kind of the summary we were talking about, to provide more value. If your presentation's entirely or almost entirely images, the slides won't mean anything. This works, but I see our students, our MBA students, go to companies that there's a certain culture with the slides. The slides are really sliduments, and people want them for documentation of where they are. Sorry, I have a similar question, says Jay. Sometimes the presentations are kept in shared files for being seen in the future. I try to give information as much as I can, because when people look at it after, that's true. But Jay, that's where the slide you use to speak and the slide you share afterwards are not the same deck. I'm not saying you're saying different things, but one is an elaborate or a deeper dive into the information, because it's going to live on its own. It's a slidument. It's not a presentation slide.
Slidument. That's a good version. I will tell you what happens quite a bit with my coaching business is that people say, well, I'm giving the presentation, and then we have to send the slides to the field teams who are all over the world, and they have to present, using that slide deck. So it has to be detailed. That's a legitimate argument, but I think a better way to do it, if you want consistency of message, is instead of sending someone 78 slides and hoping they get it right, what you do is you record a 7-minute video of you delivering the slides, and you send them the presentation slides, and you send them the supporting documentation, and you send them the video. That's how you get message consistency across an entire sales team or an entire worldwide organization. Sending them the slides isn't going to do it, frankly. Yeah.
One of our learners is saying, I've seen trainers do this, slides to teach, and student slides have more. There's so many different ways to do it with slides. One of our other learners saying, what is your presentation, Chantal? What if your presentation is a job assignment? Would you still withhold the slides until afterwards? It depends. Quite often, the shorter the presentation, I think I agree with you, Dave, is withhold any of the visuals, and then at the end say, I've summarized this in a way. Because once you put something visual in front of your audience, they're not going to pay attention to you. They're going to be reading.
Yeah.
You can argue it's an interaction strategy, but I wouldn't say it. The final thing we wanted to share with you, besides really digging in, that if you want to be a rock star, you've got to structure well, you have to prepare, pay attention to your slides, or decide not to use them, is find ways to interact with your audience. I didn't want to leave this live session without bragging about one of my most admirable and honorable teachers, Tyagarajan Siavasailam is his name. He lives in Bloomington, Indiana, and he is a master game designer. And I'm talking about instructional technology. And if you have a chance to look at his files on live online learning activities, they're called LOLAs, and we will add the link here. This is an activity where he asks you, again, you're doing a training, you're kicking off, and everyone thinks it's going to be boring, but you say, think of your last name in the alphabet from A through K, open the chat and write the one thing that's your main takeaway from the conversation in the meeting in the town hall yesterday. And then if your name starts from L to Z, open your microphone and make a comment on what the chat includes. So I've attended some of the webinars and some of the trainings from the Tiagi group, and I can tell you that there are fast, quick ways. There's a lot of card games and activities to get audiences engaged. So you will see this in the feed. Another one of my favorite tools to use, Shelby's in behind the scenes sharing some of this, is to get people, instead of saying put your phones away, is to use the phones to interact. So if you don't mind taking your phones out, we have a quick interactive way for you to answer this one question. Shelby, if we want to hide this, if you put your camera on top of the picture here and you pick it up, it will go and take you to Slido. And we're going to keep this here for a little bit because I want to see what's the one thing that comes to mind, the one word. For this to work, this is a word cloud, but you can enter a multiple choice. You can enter an open comment. Quite often in my classes, especially since the beginning of the semester, I will ask students a question. They're not going to raise their hand, but they're more likely to enter this in an answer to this type of question. A stomach ache and terror, public speaking ranks second after death, or besides that, confidence, engagement. Hopefully by attending this live, you have a little bit more confidence. Fear, an image, practice, confidence. The cool thing with this is exactly what just happened. If you set Slido.com, if you set it up into a word cloud, the word that comes off the most, or people mention the most, is the one that pops up as the bigger word in the Slido, which is quite cool. Thank you so much. Excitement. I love it. We have very optimistic and positive learners. Love to hear that as well. Julie, yay for Tiagi. Of course, I'm always singing his praises. So today we talked about, for you to be a rock star, you've got to hit your headlines and you've got to know exactly how to get to the point. We need you to practice. Think of your visuals as your assistant coach to help you give the message, make them really good, and use tools that don't take over what you say. And try to engage with the audience with either open-ended questions, activities. Dave, do you have any parting words as we close our 45 minutes?
Yeah, I think the major thing I would say is this. When you're giving a presentation, begin with the end in mind. Let's say there's a room full of 30 people and you want them all to walk out with your key message buried in their brain. Start there. What is the thing that they are going to care about? What is the thing they're going to remember 3 hours, 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months after you get done speaking? And if you get your audience to remember your key message, then that was a successful presentation. No matter what you did or how you did it, that was a successful presentation. And it's not rocket science, but to be a rock star, there are certain things that you have to do in order to make it great.
So follow some of these tips, follow some of the tools, channel your inner rock star, prepare. Hope is not a strategy is my final closing line. You've got this, you can do it well, but we want you to stay engaged and committed to the work that it takes. It's been a really fun time sharing our hour with you. Dave and I will jump and answer questions we didn't get to at the end of this. Thank you so much for joining us today, and share this stream and share this on the platform if someone didn't get to attend. We're going to close with QR codes that connect to the Stronger newsletter and to Dave's book. But signing out and thanking you for your energy. Take care.